Hello everyone and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris, and its continuing effort to supposedly save the planet and people's lives, the Party of Death now has its eyes trained squarely on the gas stoves in Americans' homes. It was such an over-the-top claim that the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission immediately had to backpedal and issue a follow-up statement, eerily reminiscent of Obama telling the country to calm down about Obamacare, saying, if you like your gas stove, you can keep your gas stove. About 1/3 of U.S. homes, 40 million, use gas stoves, and in an effort to get rid of them, Democrats built massive tax credits into their so-called Inflation Reduction Act last year. Switch to electric and they'll give you $840 of other people's money to do so. The apparent reasoning is that a medical study was released saying gas stoves pose a health threat, especially to children. By that reasoning, the Marxists should ban abortion. The major threat, they claim, nitrogen dioxide, is poisoning the environment, right along with all that carbon, and people need to be protected. AOC, of course, got in on the act, going on social media to once again tout the moral supremacy of her Green New Deal and how the planet must be saved at all costs. Whatever perhaps legitimate claims might be made about a possible health threat that a gas stove may present, this whole drama highlights yet again the Biden administration and his whole party's obsession with saving the planet. Speaking of Biden, one particularly humorous social media post profiled Jill Biden cooking on the family's, you guessed it, gas stovetop. And of course, the responses zeroed in on the question of whether the FBI would be raiding the house, not in search of classified documents, but to rip out that gas stove. The Dems' pretended deep concern about the environment has never really been about the environment per se. It's been about population reduction. And this entire charade stretches back decades. There's a prevailing thought on the left that there are just too many people on the planet, period, despite their best efforts to push abortion and contraception, which have been extremely successful in killing and preventing hundreds of millions. They still aren't satisfied. Too many people remain on the planet, period. The reproductive rate has got to come down more, and some people may have to be eliminated. Think of it as a worldwide eugenics program, more strongly promoted in Western nations to limit their population growth, and you better believe it's worked. Consequently, the third world's population boomed while the West's declined, and as they try to make up those losses through third world immigration to the West, they're now trying to push contraception and abortion in those nations as well. The whole world population just got to shrink. Bad. People are bad. Too many humans, bad. The giant mess stretches all the way back to that stellar decade of the 1960s, when what's called the Club of Rome was founded. CR is essentially a think tank for elites who invent problems and then create solutions to those problems they've invented, which impact everyone except them and their other global elite friends. Think Jill Biden's stove or John Kerry's private jets, and you get the picture. Rules for thee, not for me. In 1972, in close timing with the "there's too many people" hysteria then emerging, the Club of Rome published a little-known but extremely influential work entitled The Limits to Growth. Again, the emphasis was there's just too many people on the planet. While that line of reasoning became popular among academics and lawmakers, it never really caught on Main Street. There just wasn't enough support for any giant legislation to actively reduce the number of people. So, a shift in approach began to be emphasized. The chatter about too many people changed a little bit to the planet is in crisis and there are now major health risks to everyone. So in governments around the world and their allies in academia and media, we all started talking not about too many people, but global warming, melting icebergs, and all of that. When all those dire predictions failed to actually materialize, then the emphasis shifted again. this time from global warming to just the more benign sounding climate change. Climate change has become a much more useful slogan for the Marxists than global warming, because essentially anything that happens, anything with the weather, can be used as a propaganda tool to advance legislation or policy to control the weather. A big hurricane? Climate change. A drought? Climate change. Floods? Climate change. A really cold winter or cold spell? Climate change. Save the planet is a much easier sell than don't have children and reduce the existing population. While it was already well ensconced in public discourse, climate change as policy talk really took off under Obama. He tried to push his so-called cap and trade initiative, for example, which would have allowed only a certain amount of what they called carbon credits per U.S. manufacturer. That was a cap. If a company ran out of credits, can't exceed that cap, it just would trade something with other companies in exchange for their carbon credits. All done in the name of science, of course. The party of death has been following the science and insisting we're all in this together for quite a while now. They've got that down. A Catholic ear immediately hears the enormous issue with all of this. The entire thing is based on errant philosophy masquerading as science. Does that sound familiar? As usual, when dealing with death merchants and snake oil salesmen, there's always much more at work behind the scenes than the propaganda being presented. A dozen years ago, Church Militant produced an in-depth look at all of this in one of our faith-based investigations entitled Global Warming Unmasked. We highly suggest you view it if you haven't. Just click on the provided link on the page here. We put hundreds of man-hours of research into this production, so it is extensive. One thing we've noticed when we go back here and look at all of our earlier productions is just how relevant they are today, still are today, and as a matter of fact, even more so. Congressional Democrats and their globalist allies want fewer humans on the planet. The leaders have been very explicit about that, and they use every means possible: abortion, contraception, climate change, doesn't matter, whatever it takes. They sit on Capitol Hill and then other capitals around the world, passing laws and instituting policies to do just that. It's a very involved, multi-layered strategy, but it has that goal in mind. Everything they do is to keep the population living in a constant state of fear so they can capitalize on that fear to pass their laws. Is your gas stove a major piece of the puzzle here? Likely not, but it keeps the "you're gonna die" and "the planet is gonna die" narrative firmly in front of you. When evil-minded people get control, power is the name of the game, not you. You, in fact, are the enemy, who must be overcome by trickery and propaganda. So please click on the provided link. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.